Greetings, fellow painters! Today we're going to paint a tattered and worn red cape for our zombified superhero Doctor Strange. We're going to mix green into our red midtone color to create a wonderfully desaturated brown shadow color for this cape. This video is going to be somewhat similar to our color theory video where we mix blue with red to create a deep purple shadow color for a red cape. The big difference with this video is that not only are we going to use green to create our shadow color, but we will also mix a specific green paint with the red to create a unique highlight color. The end result will be a grittier, dingier finish that is perfectly suited to this zombified superhero. Welcome to Trehane Miniatures. The color that I like for the red cape is Bold Pyrrole Red by Monument Hobbies. It's a bright red that has outstanding coverage, and since I'm starting over a black primer, the opacity of this paint will make the job easier. I'm choosing the creatively named Green by Monument Hobbies to add to the red to achieve a brown shadow color. I honestly appreciate how Monument Hobbies chooses to name their colors. If you're a paint brand and you're naming your color something like Baby Turtle or Anal Abscess, I am not going to have any idea what those colors are. Anyway, the blend of these two paints actually creates a fairly rich, deep brown color. I'm going to apply a uniform coat of this dark brown to the entire cape on both the front and the back. So why would I mix green in with Pyrrole Red to create a dark brown shadow color instead of just grabbing one of the many pre-mixed dark brown colors that I already own? The idea that I'm working with here is that I want to use the basic mid-tone color of the cape, which is Pyrrole Red, to be in every layer of paint from the darkest shadow to the brightest highlight. The theory is that this should create a very natural looking progression through the value scale as we move from very dark red shadows to the bright red highlights. For the secondary shadow layer, we'll add more Pyrrole Red to the existing brown mix. I will not add any more green to this mixture. The resulting color will have a dark red hue to it. I'm going to apply this layer over the entire cape except for the deepest recesses that I want to remain as a dark brown shadow. As I'm painting this color next to the areas that I want to leave brown, I'll pull the paint away from the shadow area and finish the stroke at a point on each fold that will eventually be bright red. By starting at the dark brown shadow and pulling the paint away from it, it should create an easy transition between these two shadow layers. As I layer this color in, it may look like this is a huge jump in color between the two layers, as this color initially appears very bright, but as it begins to dry over parts of the cape, we can see that this layer is drying as a dark red color. The advantage of layering in this way is that I don't feel it is necessary to glaze the transition between these shadow layers. Incorporating the Pyrrole Red into each layer creates a natural progression in value from each layer to the next. For the midtone color, I'm using Bold Pyrrole Red. This is the color that I want the cape to read as, so more of the visible surface of the cape will be this color than any other color. For this layer, I'm applying the paint almost exclusively using stippling. Normally I'd continue with my usual layering approach, beginning each stroke where this layer meets the darker layer and drawing the paint towards the brighter part of the fold in the cape. But this particular cape is supposed to look dirty, tattered, and worn. Stippling will add that extra bit of texture to achieve this desired look. For this, I'm using an older size 1 synthetic brush that has lost its tip. The slightly frayed end of the brush will make the application of texture easier. As I near the areas of the cape that I want to appear darker, I will apply the stipples fewer and farther between, allowing them to sort of fade into the darker red paint. On the high points of each fold that would be catching light, I will apply multiple layers of stippling to increase the intensity of the red. I'm also going to edge highlight the cape, focusing on the bottom of the cape, the collar, and the rips and tears. I picked up 2 different green paints for this little highlighting experiment. I have chosen light green to create the highlights because it is the complementary color to red. The mix of the 2 colors should yield something that is closer to light reddish brown rather than pink, which is what we'd get if we were using white. The first green that I mix with Pyrrole Red is Faded Green by Monument Hobbies. I've switched back to a size 1 brush with a real tip now, and I'm focusing just on the most raised and upward facing parts of the cape. I'm using short strokes to apply these highlights, and I make sure that each stroke runs perpendicular to the length of the fold where I'm applying the highlight. I want it to look like light is bouncing off the texture of the cape. Mixing faded green in with the red has created a very desaturated grayish brown color. It's light enough that it's creating some interesting highlights for the cape of our zombie hero, but I'm stopping after I highlight a few of the folds in the cape. I'm pretty satisfied with how this looks, but I think that I may be able to achieve some better and brighter highlights using a different green color. The next green that I decide to mix with the Pyrrole Red is Bright Pale Green. There is none of the faded green in this mix, and this mixture produces a dirty gray pink color. As the color goes on, it looks quite pink, but becomes slightly more gray as it dries. I continue to apply the paint with short strokes that run perpendicular to the folds in the cape. I do prefer the look of this highlight mixture to the previous one, so I continue to use it over the rest of the cape. Of course, I can't resist adding in some ice yellow for the final highlights, and there is more ice yellow than Pyrrole Red in this mix. I'd rather have these highlights look a little yellow than have them look too pink. I'm going to apply these highlights very sparingly to some of the edges, like the collar, and to the very center of some of the most prominent folds in the cape. I will occasionally use some Pyrrole Red, heavily diluted with water as a glaze to knock back the intensity of the highlights where I feel that I've overdone it. Throughout the painting of this cape, I haven't used any glazing, and it's only used here as a corrective measure. I think that having a rough finish to the cape is perfectly fitting for this character. Overall, I'm very pleased with the way these highlights turned out. I like the different effect that the green offers to the highlights. What do you think of using light green paints as a highlight for red clothing? There are a couple of other green colors that I'd like to try for this, like Pale Green Gray by Vallejo comes to mind, but that'll be for another time. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of painters.